How one should select a good IPO?
See, selecting a good IPO is like selecting any good script for buying. One needs to analyze the IPO's fundamentals, the people behind the IPO, and also the financials of that company. Now, if you were to select an IPO on the basis of the financials, you will find that although many companies' financials are very good, the valuation is very high. The valuation is not justified. So it is not enough if the financials are good, but you should also, correspondingly see whether the pricing is right. I would suggest any investor to look at three things. One is the promoter, his background in the industry, how long he has been in that particular industry, and the second thing is the business model of the company, whether that business model is sustainable, scalable, and whether a long-term business growth is possible in that particular industry. The third thing would be, of course, the financials. And financials, one has to see the financials, analyze the financials, that the growth has been steady, continuous, and sustainable growth is established in the financial figures which are given in the offer document, and also that the pricing that the company proposes is in line with, say, the peer group or the the industry group which you can compare that particular company in the stock market. Then lastly, one also has to see what for the money is being raised. So when you are raising the capital for, say, for instance, for enhancing your capacity or getting into some value added segment in the same industry, then you can expect the company to do even better in the coming years. But if the money were to be raised for working capital purposes, etc., the productivity of that money being deployed will be to that extent not really efficient, because always substituting debt by equity is not advisable. So one has to also see what is the debt equity mix, who are the bankers supporting the company, whether there are some good bankers supporting the company. These are the issues one would I would suggest someone to look at in an IPO. And also, of course, one has to also see basically the promoter's background, as I already told, because ultimately whether a company becomes successful or not would to a large extent depend upon the genuinity of the promoters, their understanding of the business, and also the fact that they are not fly-by-night operators. So basically the promoter's background, the business model of the company, the industry to which they belong, and also the financials vis-a-vis the valuation which the company proposes on the shares as compared to the peer group in the same industry. So I think if these things are considered, then I think you can come to a fair conclusion whether a particular IPO is worth subscribing to or not. Unfortunately, if you see in the last few years, what has happened is that even good companies have come to the market, but unfortunately the pricing has been a little too steep. So you really need to leave something for the investors on the table. So unless that happens, even if the company is good, the investors would not find it attractive to invest in the IPOs. So my suggestion would be that even the promoters should look at pricing it in such a way that the investors get something at the end of the investment.
What would you like to say when promoters say that we are coming in a sunrise industry?
See, sunrise industry, there are many sunrise industry in the past we have seen, like for instance, many issues came in the areas of horticulture, floriculture, etc., and these were considered to be sunrise industry. Now mushrooms, these were new concepts which came in 90s, where a number of issues came, but unfortunately they were not sustainable, because you find a couple of companies doing well and a host of promoters get into that field without really knowing much about that particular industry. So sunrise industry is something where even the investors or the analysts really don't know much about the intricacies of that industry. So one has to be very careful. So here again the background of the promoter is very important. So if the promoter has been very successful in other industries, he has got the business acumen to build a company, bring it to profits over a period of time. That kind of background, if there is an established background, then certainly there's one can look at those kind of investment in those kind of companies. But if sunrise industry accompanied by a first time entrepreneur, I would say it's better to avoid.
Do you think IPOs are a good entry point for new investors?
Yes, subject to selection of the IPOs, subject to the valuation in at which you get the shares in the IPO. Subject to this, yes, definitely it is a good entry point for new investors, because it is less cumbersome compared to secondary market. The understanding in secondary market requires to be much deeper, whereas in IPO you get all the information on a platter. Only thing is you need to dissect on these basic fundamentals, like as I explained to you, the promoter's background, the company's scalability, the business model, industry segment to which they belong, etc. So it is a better entry point, but then valuation has to be kept in mind.